Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to act as textual detectives today. We're breaking down a really unique, unconventional, and honestly, super dense piece of writing. It's called Rendezvous Random in Initials Mind by Kurtaraj L.D. Rajit Singh. You know, whenever we stumble across a text that uses such unique grammar and presents this highly specific worldview, the absolute best way to figure it out is to map it out. So that's what we're doing. We're going to neutrally deconstruct the author's internal logic piece by piece to see exactly how they view the history of human society and religion. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's kick things off with the author's foundational premise. The text opens with this really bold, unifying concept. It's the idea that, quote, we all are one under Hinduism. But here's the kicker. The author explicitly defines Hinduism not as a traditional religion, but as an original, overarching way of life. This right here is the anchor for the entire document. Before the author dives into any divisions or historical conflicts, they really want to establish this baseline, that way back in the beginning, according to their narrative, there was just this single, unified societal structure.
Now, before we go any deeper into the arguments, take a look at the actual source text we're decoding today. As you can see, the text itself is literally a single continuous paragraph. It's grammatically quite unique, completely lacks traditional punctuation, and honestly, it packs a massive amount of historical and sociological claims into a very, very tight space. When you're faced with a dense wall of text like this, parsing the core arguments can be like solving a giant puzzle. And actually, that's exactly why we've translated this document into the step-by-step structure we're looking at today. We want to neutrally break down this exact paragraph to understand the highly specific logic the author is using.
Moving on to our first section, premise, the shift in the caste system.
So to really understand this worldview, we have to look at what the author identifies as the first major historical catalyst. According to them, that original, unified way of life underwent a critical and damaging shift. The text claims the caste system transitioned from step 1, which was originally based on individual abilities, to step 2, a system that became rigidly locked in birth. In the author's logic, this is kind of the original sin of society. By moving away from merit or ability and instead locking people into social tiers purely based on the circumstances of their birth, a deep structural flaw was introduced into this ancient way of life.
So what happens when a society gets completely locked into a birth-based system? Well, the text argues that, as time went on, this rigid structure created massive friction when it suddenly collided with differences in physical appearance. The author notes that, quote, ongoing time, variations emerged where people did not look like Indian. This introduces the concept of visual, physical differences acting as a wedge in a society that, remember, had already lost its flexibility by abandoning the old abilities-based system.
That brings us to the next section, conflict, appearance, diet, and divergence.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. The author asserts that feelings of deep societal abandonment directly drove the creation of entirely new faiths. We just talked about the premise of that locked caste system, right? Well, the text argues that because these individuals no longer fit into the visual or structural mold of the established society, they essentially had to invent new religions. They started creating their own god, not necessarily out of some divine revelation like traditional religious histories might claim, but basically as a sociological survival mechanism, just to have place in society.
To truly make sense of the text here, we've mapped out the author's specific categorization matrix. And wow, this is perhaps the most unconventional part of the whole document. Just look at how specific this is. The author actually believes that precise combinations of appearance and diet dictated the formation of major world religions. For example, if you were complete black or white and a meat lover, the text claims you were given place in Christianity. But if you were fair look like Indian and also a meat lover, you were given place in Islam. Again, we're presenting this totally neutrally just to show you the exact mechanics of the author's internal logic. They are literally using this rigid matrix to explain global religious divergence.
Taking a step back to look at the broader picture for a second, the document essentially frames world history as this huge dynamic between two distinct groups, the abandoned color peoples and the established original society. These newer religions are viewed entirely as products of these abandoned groups. They were actively seeking the societal honor and placement that the birth-locked, established society had denied them. It's basically a narrative of exclusion directly leading to the creation of alternative societal structures.
Let's move to our final section, resolution, the call for religion correction.
So having laid out this super complex history of castes, colors, diets, and new gods, the author actually has a very clear agenda for how we should view all this today. They state that modern society is currently suffering from a massive misconception. They argue that giving honor to other religions is a fundamental error, and they call for a correction of what they term the mistake of equality over ego. Now, in the context of this text, the concept of equality seems to be viewed negatively, almost like a false equivalency that inappropriately elevates religions the author believes were merely reactive creations, instead of recognizing the primacy of that original way of life.
And this number perfectly illustrates the sheer scale of the author's historical timeline: 10,000. The text explicitly claims that this original oldest religion or way of life is 10,000 and more years old. By throwing out this massive number, the author is clearly attempting to completely dwarf the timelines of Christianity and Islam, which reinforces their whole matrix from the previous information. For the author, this extreme age is the primary justification for why their system deserves the absolute utmost reverence.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that the author's entire argument, this dense grammatical puzzle, culminates in one singular plea: to make oldest world religions honorable. It is a direct, emphatic appeal to restore primacy, ego, and honor to this ancient way of life. And at the same time, to demote the newer, supposedly reactive religions back to their origins as mere survival mechanisms for the abandoned. That is the core of the message.
While we are remaining strictly observational of these highly unconventional claims, reading and decoding texts like this is just an incredible exercise. It leaves us with a fascinating, broader question to ponder. What actually drives the human desire to radically categorize history in such rigid, specific ways? Because whether it's through abilities, birth, diet, or appearance, humans clearly have this deep-seated need to explain our place in the world, to understand who belongs where, and to seek honor within our societies. Analyzing texts like this, no matter how idiosyncratic they are, gives us a really unique window into that very human pursuit. Thanks so much for walking through this explainer with me today.